Hi, I'm Danny Brown, and I'm the CEO of Myriad Real Estate Group, and this is my November market update. So before I jump into my market update, I wanted to reference to a video I did about Zillow's announcement. Pretty big announcement, them backing out of the iBuying program altogether. And I don't believe that this is going to impact the real estate market here in Greater Phoenix or even nationwide. I think it's just going to be a blip on, the radar. And if you want to see that video, we'll reference it in the notes. So take a look at that as well. So where are we at right now? The market traditionally coming out of the fall tends to be relatively busy. Some of our best months anecdotally have been, October, November, and our worst months tend to be December and January. So what I think that we're seeing right now is the seasonality of Phoenix kicking back in. So the Phoenix real estate market is super predictable, and I know I've talked about this in previous videos, where we have our spring selling season, where most of our appreciation and properties sell. It starts in January and tends to end in June, and we see a lot of transactions take place. And if you look back throughout the last 20 years, that is very predictable. It seems to happen every single year where we see this ramp up and then we start to come back down as soon as we kind of get into July. I think that has to do with kids being out of school, people going on vacation. It's super hot here outside, so people aren't too jazzed about seeing homes in 115-degree weather. So for Phoenix, it's almost like our winter months, right? So the market really tends to slow down in July and August. Well, once the kids go back to school, we see an uptick in market activity, September, October, and the first half of November. We saw that this year. September, October, first half of November, very steady in terms of real estate. Lots of transactions were taking place. We saw an uptick in listing activity. I even saw videos from other realtors out there talking about how we're seeing, demand kind of go down and we're seeing listing activity increase. Is this the sign of a shift in the marketplace? I say no. I think it's just our seasonality kicking back in, and you can reference my previous videos to reinforce that. So what do I think that the rest of the year is going to look like? I think it's going to look like much like every other year that we've had outside of 2020. I went back and looked at previous year's data, and the supply-demand curves and the active listings versus sold listings, very similar trajectory. So I think that we are seeing right now listing activity decrease. We're getting closer to the holidays. Thanksgiving's right around the corner. So is Christmas. Sellers don't want strangers walking through their properties during the holidays. They're decorating for Christmas. It's super tacky to have MLS photos with Thanksgiving or Christmas decorations up. So I think a lot of people who are interested in selling are getting to that point where, unless they really need to make a move or they've got a vacant property, they're waiting until after the first of the year. We are seeing an uptick in demand, which we typically see around this time, which is normal. Most people that are putting their toe into the buyer market are usually 30, 60, 90 days out. Somebody contacts us, they're not usually looking to buy a home today. They're looking to buy a home within the next few months. So that is very in line with your January, February, March months being very busy. They're starting to get into the market now. And if you've driven around Phoenix right now, lots of people are coming into town. Sky Harbor is reporting, numbers are very, very high in terms of people coming in and leaving. So the airport's busy, our roads are super busy. So I think our snowbirds are starting to return and people are coming to Phoenix, which is why we see that uptick in demand. So I think that our seasonality is just kicking in. We had zero seasonality last year because of the pandemic. It was just steady all the way through. Demand was super high. And I think people forget that this is kind of what our natural market looks like. Our supply is still drastically low. There's only about 7,000 homes listed for sale in all of Greater Phoenix. For us to be in a more balanced market, we should be much closer to something like 25 to 30,000 homes on the market. So we're severely under that, and that is going to cause homes to continue to appreciate through the end of the year and into 2022. I also think that mortgage interest rates in 2022 are going to start to rise, which will put downward pressure on demand. But we have such a far gap between where demand is and where supply is that for those two to get even close to one another, we would have to see a very, very steep drop off in the level of demand for housing. I just don't see that happening pending any, economical disaster that is on the horizon that we can't see. And there's a lot of stuff going on in the world, so things could influence the housing market that we're just not predicting right now. The Fed is going to stop doing as much QE, so they're going to taper back their purchases of mortgage-backed securities. I don't think the Fed's going to raise rates until 2023. So I think things are going to remain kind of the way that they're at. Some other things that I'm paying attention to, though, are the supply chain disruptions. That's going to really cause issues to the economy. I think people are still wanting to buy a bunch of stuff. They just can't get it. So there are headwinds that we're facing, but the housing market in general looks very strong because the demand for housing is still where it's at and the supply is relatively low. So I think we can predict that level of appreciation that we've seen is going to kind of continue here for the foreseeable future until those two curves start to get closer to one another between supply and demand. So what does that mean to you? Well, traditionally, the holidays have been one of the best times to be a buyer in the real estate market. The choices are limited because there's not as many sellers right now, but the homes that are listed for sale, those sellers are relatively desperate to sell. They're listing for a reason. They need to sell the property, or they've been listed for a little while and they're still on the market. So traditionally, the holiday season is when a buyer can get the best deal for a home, but you can't be picky. That's the only problem because, again, there's not as much inventory to choose from. If you're thinking of selling, just know demand is still high, so it is still an okay time to be a seller, but the best time to be a seller is after January 1. So if you're not in a position where you have to sell, maybe consider waiting until after the new year. But if you are in a position where you have to sell, there's still a lot of buyer activity out there, a lot of pent-up buyer demand from all of the previous months and buyers who haven't been able to find homes. I mean, we're still showing buyers that have been looking for north of 8 months for properties. So those buyers still exist and they're still on the hunt for homes. So it could still be an okay time to sell. But if you can, if I'm selling, I'm probably waiting until the spring. If I'm buying and I'm not super specific or picky on what I'm looking for, this could be a great time to be a buyer. So if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next market update video.